Good morning. It's getting darker out. It's that time of the year, so hopefully everyone's waking up okay. So to make my first point, I'd like to tell you about my Uncle Joe. I used to call him Uncle Yo-Yo, but that's a whole other thing. Does anyone here have like a funny uncle who's like, he's, a little bit different than the rest? You don't have to raise your hands, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. So my dad and my Uncle Joe they were just about Irish twins. They were a year and 6 days apart. And Uncle Joe was the one to whom all the bad things happened to. But then you could laugh about it because he always landed on his feet. And my grandma actually used to tell him, you're going to do all right in spite of yourself, And he did. He had a good job. He was a good guy. He was very generous. He was a faithful man. But when something bad happened, it always happened to Uncle Joe. And he actually got into skydiving for a little bit, and then he quit kind of abruptly. So we think he had a scare, and luckily he quite literally landed on his feet, and then he quit skydiving. So a few years ago at a family gathering, I brought up the story of how at one of the family weddings, I wasn't sure which one, the photographer's car got stolen right out of the church parking lot during the wedding. And my aunt said, well, that was Uncle Joe's wedding. Okay, yes, I should have known that. I should have known that. At another family wedding, Uncle Joe, it wasn't his wedding, but he had a little too much to drink, and his other brother told him, hey, you're making a fool of yourself. So he got upset, and without telling anyone, without even telling his wife, he decided to leave and hitchhike home. Yeah, and this was in the days before cell phones, so no one knew where he went. They had to break up the wedding, form search parties, and go looking for him. No joke. And they found him. He actually, is about 20 miles from the wedding reception to his house. He almost made it all the way home. So they found him hitchhiking in his tuxedo. But before they found him, they were seriously concerned. There was a canal across the street. Did he fall in and drown? They didn't know. So that's Uncle Joe. So Uncle Joe is the only one in my family, at least my close family, to have been divorced, which put him back on the dating scene. And when I was 20 and on the dating scene himself, he was 50, and we were both playing for the same church softball team, and afterward we go to a restaurant, and Uncle Joe, was making passes at girls that I should have been making the passes at. Yeah, you can picture this scene. Around this era, Uncle Joe went on a date, and he took his date to the parish festival, which is innocent enough. On the way home, he got pulled over, and the police ran both of their IDs, and it turns out she had done time for the manslaughter of her ex. She was on parole and was not supposed to be that far away from home, so the date ended with the police arresting her and taking her away. Yeah. Has anyone had any bad dates? Yeah. I think my uncle said, thank you, officer, So that's the type of stuff that would happen to Uncle Joe. It didn't happen to anyone else. It only happened to Uncle Joe. But again, he would land on his feet and we'd have a good laugh. So many of you have that relative whom you kind of roll your eyes about. In my family, that was Uncle Joe. He was the butt of a lot of jokes. He got teased a lot. He had a good job and made good money and would stop and pick up pop cans for 10 cents, He was often talked down to. After his divorce and after my grandmother's passing, he moved in with my grandfather so that he could help him out. So one time in my grandfather's final months, there were some paint cans in the basement that needed to be moved. So Uncle Joe's siblings told him, hey, you gotta, you live here, you live with Grandpa, you gotta move these paint cans. So a couple months went by and he didn't do it. So another one of my uncles who was dying of cancer, he stopped by and he moved the paint cans. So Uncle Joe's siblings really let him have it. You had months to do that, you never did it. A man dying of cancer had to come over and do it. The whole reason you're living with Grandpa is to help him out, let's go. They laid into him. So my grandfather died on August 13th, 2018, which was actually Uncle Joe's birthday. And in November of 2018, so 3 months later, Uncle Joe wasn't feeling so good. And he eventually went to the hospital, and it was one of those things it's just this, we'll keep you here a few days, and then you'll be fine. A few days later, well, okay, actually it's a heart thing, take this and you'll be fine. Okay, actually, it's more serious than we thought it was. It's going to require surgery. But these surgeries today, they're basically routine. You'll be fine. So on November 20th, 2018, Uncle Joe went into surgery. Things went south. On November 22nd, Thanksgiving morning, Uncle Joe passed away. He had never even stirred since his surgery. So the hospital called us when they knew they were losing him, but we couldn't get there in time. So Uncle Joe passed away about 1:30 in the morning, Thanksgiving morning, no one at his side. Yeah, it was very sad, very sad. So before that, I was actually in the UP at Uncle Joe's cabin. He's got a hunting cabin up there. And I was there when I learned he needed surgery. So I came home about a 500-mile drive, threw my stuff in the rectory, went to visit him. So 2 days before the surgery, I went to the hospital, brought him the Eucharist, heard his confession, anointed him, got him all good to go. And in my visit, he told me that he hadn't felt good for about a year and a half. So after Uncle Joe's passing, like our family sure did a lot of thinking. Like for a year and a half, Uncle Joe was dying right in front of us, and we didn't notice. We noticed Grandpa, who was dying. We noticed our other uncle, who was dying of cancer. Uncle Joe was plenty sick too. We never noticed. So in the gospel today, we have the rich man, and then we have Lazarus, who was lying at the rich man's door. Uncle Joe was lying at our door in plain sight. We didn't notice. Now, we noticed his shortcomings, oh yes, but we didn't notice his needs. Is there anyone in our families who's suffering right in front of us, lying at our doorstep, whom we are failing to notice? Maybe it's physical suffering, maybe it's moral suffering, maybe it's emotional, some kind of addiction or something. So our first reading today talks about complacency. Are we complacent with the needs of any of our family members or neighbors? It's worth praying about. So Mother Teresa, I love Mother Teresa. She used to challenge people like, okay, yes, you could come to Calcutta, help me out, okay, great. But don't you have any poor in your own home? And of course we do. We have loads of poor in various forms of poverty too, lying at our doors. Is there anyone we ought to be noticing right now? Take that to prayer. Take that to prayer. So, my first point is to challenge our complacency with our neighbor. My second point is to challenge our complacency with God. So, a few hundred years ago in Ireland and England, the Catholic faith was outlawed. You couldn't have Mass. If they were to find a priest, they would arrest him and execute him, you know. But if there was a priest around, if you could get wind, hey, there's a priest, we're going to have Mass, they would run out into the fields, and they would have Mass. They, you know, of course, they didn't have a big, beautiful church like this. They were hiding. They were in the fields. And the priest would say Mass back when everyone was facing the same way. And an old man would volunteer to stand next to him. So the priest is saying Mass. And if the lookout spotted soldiers and knew, like, oh boy, we're not going to be able to escape, the lookout said, hey, the soldiers are coming. So very quickly, the priest and the old man, they'd turn and face each other. The priest would put his vestments on the old man. The old man would step in front of the altar like he was saying Mass, and the priest would step down with the people. And the soldiers would come in. They'd see this old guy saying Mass, wearing the priest's vestments. What do you think they assumed? Oh, obviously he's the priest. They'd take him away and execute him, and the priest would go on to bring the sacraments to others. So it's amazing. I mean, like, nowadays we have a hard time getting volunteers for, like, donuts, you know? And people used to volunteer to die in the priest's place so that others could receive the sacraments. It's amazing what our forefathers did. Another thing that would happen, and this was, I think, mainly in Russia. So in Russia, after the faith was outlawed, it took some time for them to get rid of the priests, kill the priests, banish the priests. Some they arrested, sent to Siberia. But eventually there were no priests. So when the priests would get kicked out, the people would rush in and they'd grab the corporal. So the corporal, so this is the altar cloth here. But the corporal is this cloth here. And the whole point of the corporal is to catch any particles of the Eucharist, because every single particle is Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity. So when a priest says Mass, he sets the bread and the wine on the corporal, and with the intention of, hey, I'm consecrating what's on the corporal. That way he's not like accidentally consecrating stuff in the back, so the corporal. So the people, when the priests were banished, they rush into the church, and they would grab the corporal. And it's very important, it has to be folded in the right way so no particles get dropped off or anything. And they would grab the corporal, and they'd steal it. Not steal it, they would take it, and they would hide it. And then on Sundays, they'd get the corporal out. They had no priest, but they had a corporal that might have particles of the Eucharist. It might not. Maybe it was new. Maybe it was clean. There might be no particles there, but there might be. And the people would gather around, and I've read horror stories of what would happen if these people got found worshiping together. Deaths and executions and banishments and arrests. And even if you got to stay in society, you get put on a list where you could never get a decent job again. You and your children would be starving if you got caught worshiping. But they did it. They risked everything for the possibility of being in God's presence. And maybe they weren't even in his presence. Like maybe there's a particle there, maybe there's not. They risked everything just for the possibility of being in God's presence. And today we go, so it's amazing. It's amazing our forefathers, what they risked for the sacraments, for the spread of the faith. And today we go, well, I'm tired. I don't get anything out of Mass. I have soccer. Yeah, it's not good. It's not good. So what was it? What was it that our forefathers thought was worth dying for? That's worth praying about. Why were our forefathers giving their lives for the faith, for the sacraments, for God? And then how are we? How are we? So, to conclude, I would like us to pray about, just over the next week or so, complacency. Where have I become complacent? And we all do it. So honestly, like us priests, we try to pray a holy hour every day. And typically, in most days when we're busy, we get it in. The hardest time for me to get my holy hour in is when I'm on vacation, when I have all the time in the world. It's true. It's true. It's too easy. There's masses everywhere. I'll get one next week. Where have I become complacent? Where have I become complacent with my neighbor? Is someone lying at my doorstep? Do you have an Uncle Joe? And where have I become complacent with God? Has lukewarmness crept into my life? Come, Holy Spirit, come. Light us on fire with the love of Christ. God love you.